Hey, so I want to make a video sharing my thoughts about the removal of clock and I guess the future of the cubing in the WCA. If now, if you're one of my subscribers and you're not a cuber, I know there's a few of you that are not, then this is about cubing. Basically, what happened is there was an announcement that was made a few weeks ago that said that they were going to add face turning octahedron, FTO, and remove clock. They're going to change the events. And that's kind of a big deal. This kind of thing doesn't happen very often at all. It's been over a decade since they've added an event, and 5, 6 years since they've removed an event. So, kind of a big deal. And the reaction is, I mean, I'm mostly going to talk about the removal of clock because that has had a very vehement reaction from a lot of people, to say the least. Uh, Not a very popular, as far as what I've seen, it's not very popular. A lot of people are disagreeing with it, and so I'm just going to share my thoughts like off the cuff. I have a list of things here that I'm going to cover, but for the most part, I'm just going to be talking. I never do anything like this, so I don't know. I thought, why not? Since a lot of people, like everyone, and their mothers made a video about this at this point. I'm late to the party. So, if you don't know me, uh, I've been competing since 2011. So 15 years. It's crazy, I know. And I've competed over 200 competitions. Um, I was also a delegate for a number of years, and I've delegated about 70. So, I've I've been in the community for a long time. I've been in the organizational side for a good amount of time, and I did resign from my position as a delegate in 2023, um, just because life got in the way. I just got busier, and I couldn't do it to the fullest like I wanted to. So ever since then, I've been you know more hands off. I don't really practice anymore, especially not like I did 10 years ago. And I go to competitions here and there to see people compete because I still enjoy doing that sometimes. But for the most part, you know, I don't really practice anymore. I'm a husband and father now, so not really in it anymore. But I have been mostly paying attention to what's been going on, and there's been like a myriad of things going on lately. So that's my background. And as far as clock, I've never been much of a clock solver. I average like sub 8 on a good day. I was never really great at clock. But so, you know, in saying that, being out of the community and not having solved clock very much at all, well, been good at clock at all. I haven't been good at clock at all. Um, this is not me trying to dictate what should have been done, or say how you should feel about it. But I am going to offer, I guess, some advice to some people, because some people aren't taking this very well. Um, and also, like I said before, I'm going to talk about like probably where the WCA is going, where cubing is going, um, and I'm going to also try and only speak about this in a way that's like unique, or things that have been unsaid. Uh, because what I was gonna do was just read the announcement and talk about it. Maybe not read the announcement, but like talk about every point that they make in the announcement. Talk about all the reasons one by one. But like honestly, that's been done over and over again at this point. It's been a few weeks. Like this was almost a month ago that they announced this. I'm super late to this. Like just finally getting around to talking about it. But I'm going to go over it generally and also just kind of respond to some of the discourse that's been going on. Um, so, in the announcement, they went over a few different reasons as to why they chose to remove clock. Um, so I feel like there were three main like ideas that were talked about. It was that it was very dissimilar to the other events, which is true. It's always been true. Um, Is that a good case for removing it? I don't know, probably not. Um, it's hard to scramble, incident prone, tough to run as a organizer or whatever. This is all under one umbrella. And for, I feel like a lot of people would disagree with that, especially now after regulation changes and better hardware. That was definitely true 5 or 10 years ago, but not so much now, at least not around me. Um, and then the third reason was that it's not very spectator friendly. You can't really see what's going on. And, there's disagreements about that. And, I'm going to go way more into spectator friendliness and just cubing as a spectator sport in general. Like later in this video, I'll be talking about that at length because I have some thoughts on it. Um, so that's kind of what they say are the reasons, and in the announcement at least. And I will say at first, one thing that I do see the arguments some people make is let's take spectator friendliness, for example. Um, they would say something like, well, FMC is like even less spectator friendly than clock. So by that logic, why don't we just remove that? And that's not a good argument because, they're giving all of these reasons. And, there's a survey too, which I'm not going to go into. That's been talked about a ton. Um, there's all these factors, right? And, we're looking at it holistically here. All like all of these were factors. It's not just one thing. Like just because one other event, excuse me, just because one other event fits the mold of, you know, why of the reasoning why it would be removed better, that doesn't mean like it has the other issues as well. I mean, you could argue that, but like I think I see that argument made a lot, and it's just not like a great argument in my opinion. Um, Now, obviously, the public reaction, or like at least what you see, is not good. Like people don't like this. If you want to know my opinion, I it's hard for me to look at this with outrage because just because of like my perspective. Like I'm not really doing this anymore. Um, but I do understand that someone would feel slighted by this being removed if they were especially good at it or cared about this event a lot. And, maybe they have the wrong thinking sometimes, but in general, like, I probably would not have done it this way if I were the board. Um, I think, first of all, like, I feel like there is this implication that they are trying to make space for FTO. And that might be true, but I think that they could have probably kept both. You know, at this point, I'm not like, I kind of wanted it to be removed many years ago, but not now because, even though it's dissimilar, it's so ingrained in Cuban culture. And, even if it's not something I care about so much, like a lot of people, like it's a very popular event. It's like a top half popularity event. I think it's like seventh most popular. I don't know what parameter they're using for that statistic, but um, it's on the more popular side. Hardware's gotten better. I don't know who's having issues running it. I think the people that are having issues running it and the people that aren't, they need to communicate. Um, because what I see people say is like, oh, skill issue. Well, like from an organizational perspective, skill issue. Well, if someone's like legitimately having trouble like running the event, just telling them skill issue is just not helpful. And on the other side of the coin, if you are having trouble running the event, the solution is not to just avoid it. Because for almost 10 years now, we've had majors with qualification times. Like this implies that there needs to be some sort of structure where any given person has decent access, ideally, to every event so that they can qualify for it if they were wanted to compete at it at a national or continental level or what have you. Um, so, so yeah, like if I was being charitable, if I was being most charitable, I would say that these reasons are, they're outdated, or they don't make sense, or they lack context. And if one was being less charitable, they would say it's BS, and that's a lot of what I'm seeing. So, from a, I think this could also be looked at from like a championship perspective. Like, I think I saw something, I think one of the board members and Dan Smith, they might have, I know they've talked to people at NAC, and, some people have talked about like what they said when they had conversations with them. There's no formal interview, so it's hard to, it's hard to quote them. You can't really quote them. There's no actual interview. It's just people having uh, conversations. But I heard that like organizers of majors specifically really did not like the idea of adding an event, and I think that really speaks to the idea of like making room for it and them removing clock. But at the same time, I think Caleb Fox is the one that probably spoke about this at most. If you ever saw his video, um, he talks about like asking about like 5 line and 7x7 and all the other like potential like events to be removed. And Dula, who is the board member who we talked to, said, well, we need to do something about that too. And there's also an implication in the announcement that like, you know, these events could be on the chopping block later. And, it seems like at championships, they want to have less events in general. And I think there are ways to do that. I mean, people aren't going to take it well, but well, there are ways, first of all, to have all the events you want, at least the events that exist, plus FTO and clock. Um, and if you look at the survey, like they kind of allude to a lot of these, like um, they allude to a lot of these, what's the word, strategies or tools that they could use. You know, at first they mentioned like strict qualification times, and asking people, would you like to see like stricter qualification times at majors? And I'm thinking like, honey, we are already there. Like we're already getting like I used to compete at every event at nationals. If I went to NAC this year, I could maybe do like 6, 7 events. Like that's it. Like it's gotten real strict, and it's only going to get stricter. I mean, you think about the nationals in 2025. Like barely anyone could go to that, or barely anyone could compete in that, I should say. Um, but I think things are going to get stricter as far as that goes. And, I was also thinking like maybe hold fewer rounds. Like I looked at the NAC schedule and it looked pretty tight, but, you know, I think in my opinion, at a championship, you should hold as few rounds as necessary to accurately crown a champion. That's my opinion. So if you don't need more than 2 rounds of something to do that, like big cubes, for example, you should not hold more than 2 rounds because you have a very limited amount of time. Um, and I think like with those strategies, you could do it. And I believe the world championship in Uppsala is going to have both events. From my understanding, it's at least going to have clock. It should have FTO because it will be an event by then. Um, so you could see how that goes. I guess these organizers were up for it, but generally, the organizers of major championships, they don't want more events. It's hard enough to run all of them. So that's kind of the deal. And probably what I would do if I was the board is implement a tiered system like what's been talked about at length, like a tiered system where, well, my vision personally is, there are some core events like 3x3, 4x4, one-handed. I don't like one-handed that much, but it's a core event, I'll admit. Um, all like, and there's about 10 of these, maybe more. I'm not going to say which, like, I'm not going to give you a list, but you know, these are events that should be at every championship, and then maybe rotate some out every championship cycle, like at like every world championship, like have some events, and then maybe at that world championship, like before awards or some or after awards or something, they could announce like, here are the events that are going to be at the next World Championship, and then it is a race. You have 2 years. Go ahead, and you know, I guess I like that because I'm not as much. I don't believe as much in being too much of a specialist. I think there's a lot of value in like doing a lot of different events because I just think it's fun. But I understand why a lot of people would not like the idea of rotation of events. But I do think that local competition should be able to hold whatever event, like even if it's like a tier two, meaning that it's an event, but it's not being required. It's not required to be held at the same, at least at the same level, at a world championship or anything like that. Um, so that's probably what I would do. Just keep have it at a second tier, and maybe they considered that. Maybe it could happen in the future, but maybe it's just strange to have a tier two include like making made up of just one event. I don't know, but you know my opinion was you cannot you cannot have the same events forever. Like if something becomes popular like FTO, there's been a strong community for years. Um, you know, you have to have a mechanism to add them to the WCA. You know, it's just I guess with me competing for 15 years, things get stale. you know, um, so I'm glad that they did something because a lot of people I know they they have this idea of the WCA they sort of associate them with inaction. Not recently, but in general, like things don't change much. They're sort of adverse to making any changes. So I'm kind of glad that they just dove in and did something, um, even if it's not, even if it's not popular. Like I think they had to do something. It's just not exactly what I would have done. I wouldn't have just flat out removed the event. I think that's there's some insulting elements to that. I think we can all agree. Um, so I think this also speaks to like moving on. I think this also speaks to like where cubing is headed, and I think part of this is like I guess this is about it being like spectator friendly, clock being spectator friendly. Like it seems that the WCA wants to make cubing a more attractive product. It wants to make it a more marketable thing. At least like their version of cubing. They want to make it more marketable because they want to attract sponsors, which leads to more finances, more money going through the org, and that's ideally the best thing for everybody if that money is allocated correctly. Which I would trust that they would allocate it correctly. I would hope so. Um, but I think that is their goal. Um, So maybe they think that removing clock helps with that, but I'm just not sure if whatever benefit removing clock would bring is worth the damage that it's doing now. Maybe the damage that it's doing now is overstated. Maybe it's just current and people are mad, and maybe after 2028 we'll mostly forget about this. I don't know, but I'm just not sure about it. It seems like a big change, and I'm not sure about it. Are my glasses crooked? Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, like I feel like whether you like it or not, like this push to making it into a viewable thing, an attractive thing, a marketable thing is this is natural progression. This is what happens when something grows like at the rate that cubing does. Um, the organizations, not just the WCA. There's all these other organizations popping up in China, and there's whatever happened in the Philippines where they got that dude got the 5 second one hand single. Obviously, there's PSL, and we'll talk about PSL too. Um, but I think naturally, like it's been around for this long, it's gotten more and more competitive as time goes on. This is just natural. Um, I think people viewing cubing as a spectator sport is just natural. Um, Now, when I first started, and moving on to cubing as a spectator sport, when I first started in 2011, it was all about it was all about competing. Like there wasn't much emphasis on like watching cubing at all. Um, you had majors that had head-to-head finals, not like bracket style head-to-head like we do now in some competitions, but solving one at a time, still doing average of five, like bring two people out at a time. This person solves, the deal. They had that even back in 2011 and even before that, but it was never a focal point. Like it felt like a supplement, you know, like you go to nationals to compete, like no one, very few people went to like Nats or whatever to just watch, or Worlds. They didn't go to just watch unless, their family member was in it or something. Um, this is really new. This push for it to be a spectator sport is really new. I like to think of cubing, like the history of cubing, as being being composed of eras. And when I say that, I don't mean like associating them with whoever's the fastest cuber is, like the Felix era or the Max era, the Yiheng era. I mean like because that doesn't. I feel like whoever the fastest cuber is doesn't directly affect the average cuber. Like they don't see it. Like what I mean is like how do things change for the average person that's going to competitions and maybe they're not like really fast, but like how does the experience change? And for example, like late 2010s, 2016, this was a time when like I think there's a lot of things that like define this era of cubing. Like, you know, hardware was getting crazy. Like, you know, Chris Tran started putting magnets in cubes, and that was huge. And sooner or later, magnets were in everything, and it changed. Like hardware was so much better. Cube stores started becoming like way more prominent. They were sponsoring so many people, and they also sold like Cubicle at the Pro Shop, Speed Cube Shop had something similar. Um, making cubes so that you wouldn't have to set them up as much. And people were getting more competitive in general. And then 2017, that's that that was important because that was the first year where Nats and Worlds in Paris had qualifiers, like, or qualification times, and you had to qualify for events, and they weren't very tough to make, but you know it put the onus on regions, in my opinion, to hold events that they would not normally hold a lot. You started seeing qualifier competitions, like back in the day, excuse me, like if I want to do like multi-blind or five blind, Nats might have been the only place I could have done it some years. Um, Now you got to be like really good in order to compete at nationals. Like I used to have a NAR in multi-blind. I can't even compete in NAC this year or Worlds last year. I couldn't do it. Like it's totally different now with these qualifications, and that's when it started. A lot of things started during this time. And after that, you know, early 2020s. I mean, COVID happened. There was a COVID boom. There was not many competitions, and um, that was because we couldn't have competitions because of COVID, I guess. Um, so and there was a big COVID boom, and there was a lot more people like trying to compete, and then there you wouldn't have a competition in your area, and the closest one would be some 40-person pavilion competition in Georgia, and some people like actually flew out to that thing just because that was it. Like people had an itch to compete, especially people that have never competed before and just got into cubing because they didn't have much else to do. And this huge amount of demand that along with like the sparser the sparse amount of competitions, uh, that defined that part of cubing. And the one we're in now, uh, it could be defined by a few things. I think it could be defined, by the tumultuousness within the WCA, a lot of decisions that people don't really agree with, sliding like the Clock World Championship last year. There were some other things I think, but you know, like a lot of disagreement, um, a lot of controversies like that. But I think for the most part, like this era might have started in 2024 when we first had an All Stars competition in Minneapolis. Um, and this was a competition where you had to be like what sub 7, sub 8 in order to register. And it came along with nationals, so it didn't feel like its own thing. Like people wouldn't travel to Minneapolis just for this competition. There was nationals too, or NAC, I should say. Sorry, but you know this, and then beginning of 2025 was PSL was announced, and this was something that, like, you know I should mention, like, the All Stars competition, that was something that they expected people to go to, just to watch. And you know PSL is the same way. Like, it was, I don't, they've had, I haven't really been following what they've been doing. They have, like, but they started out as like a double elimination bracket, and that mostly just serves like the better competitors, um, because they just do more solves. And the point of that was to you know the point of that was to, like, make more of a spectacle, just like I was talking about, like cubing being a spectator sport. It was to make it more of a spectacle. It was to help top solvers with their brand. If they had a brand that they wanted to build, this was their opportunity. Um, it was good for content creators because it gave them something to talk about. And some people don't mind, like, paying a few bucks to go to a competition and watch if it's interesting to them. And that's how it is now. But I will say personally that, to me, that's not, like, whenever there's like a competition like that, or Nationals 2025 in Providence, where um, you know some things I can't compete in, or um, you know these competitions that are essentially invitationals. Um, to me, I don't get excited by those things because, and it's not, I'm not trying to yuck anyone's yum. I understand that people want this. Some people enjoy it, and if there's a market for it, then it should prevail. But it's just strange because when I started competing in 2011, like I said, it was all about competing, and that's how I interacted with the community. That's how I view cubing. That's how I cubed. It was about, like, me solving cubes and getting better. And that is like a huge part for most people. But you know, like, I see people talk about how, like, for live streams, that um they want to market to non-cubers. They want non-cubers to watch. And that's fine if you want to have like a more beginner or non-cuber friendly stream. That's fine. Um this is this is my thing, though. Um what I don't want is for someone's introduction to cubing to be just watching the fastest people solve, and then not do it themselves. Do you know what I mean? Like, how do I put this? Well, I don't know that this could be like something I'm worrying about. I'm not really worrying, but this could be something I'm worrying about that's like not really a legitimate thing that that's true or at all. Like, maybe people don't operate like this, but you know, I feel like if some people, like, if when they see cubing, it's just people solving in less than 6 seconds, it might not look accessible to them. because that's all they see. Now, if you were to see a WCA competition and you see someone solving in 30 seconds, 40 seconds, that might give you an idea like, oh, I could go to these things too if I just get a little bit faster instead of getting all the way to 6 seconds. Um, I don't know how everyone's thinking, but you know, I do want cubing to grow. Um, but what I mean by growth is not more viewers. What by growth I mean more people solving cubes. That's what I want because, you know, if you just have more spectators, I feel like that's not growth, that's just awareness. Um, so I would say if you're like new to cubing, if you're just interested in cubing and you like watching like content like that, that's fine. But I think if you're legitimately interested in it and you just watch it, and then I think you're doing yourself a disservice, because like cubing has been very formative for me. Um, it's an important experience that I've had, and a lot of people will tell you the same. And I like if you're interested in it, you should try it. It's an accessible thing. It's not about just watching the fastest people. It's about doing something that you or maybe your family or friends didn't even think was possible. Solving one of these things, and then it's about finding out that you just want to do it faster, and then getting addicted to it, and then going to a competition and meeting other people that are like-minded and do the same thing as you. And it's about like setting personal bests at these competitions and then going to another one and trying to beat them and not being so focused on other people. It's about surprising yourself. It's about, breaking barriers that you never thought you could. And it's about gaining confidence. Like maybe not just in cubing, but maybe that gives you the confidence to, excuse me, do things in other areas of your life that you didn't think were possible because you did this other thing that you didn't think was possible. You know, I don't know if a lot of people like felt that way about cubing like I did, but that's why when I stopped being so competitive, like, especially 2017, I wasn't as competitive at that point. My competitiveness was before that. Um, that's why I wanted to be a delegate. I wanted to give people the same thing. Um, I wanted other people to have that experience. So, the more competitions that I delegate, the better. The more like the more people I give access to competitions, the more solves that people have access to, the more motivation people are going to have to get better and have that kind of experience. And whenever I see someone, from the DC area where I delegated, killing it in finals at a major, like I like to think that I helped, because they like if I didn't give them so many opportunities to, beat PRs or, be around their friends or anything like that, these WCA competitions just from being there, just from being a delegate, um, they might not be in the same place, like that. But that what I'm saying is like that's like I think the best part of cubing is cubing. That's what I tell people. The best part of cubing is cubing. It is not living vicariously through kids that you've never met. Like sure, like if you like watching it, that's fine. Again, not trying to yuck anyone's yum, but I encourage that you try it. Like, try it, have the experience. That's what I want. I want people to have the experience. So I guess that's how I feel about it being a spectator sport. It's not personally for me, but I accept that it's going in that direction. Um, and I brought this up because along with the clock discourse, there's been some more discourse about whether cubing is a spectator sport, and I'm not going to talk about whether cubing is a sport because I'm not here to argue semantics. I think that's a stupid conversation. But like, I think it's a sport, sure, and it can be a spectator sport as well. It's just that it's just not like how I grew up with it, you know. Um, and that whole thing about like experiencing it for yourself. I think every PSL cuber, every top cuber would agree with me, I think, and tell you the same thing, that you know it's great and you should do it. Um, that's what I think. Uh, so if it wants to go in the spectator sport direction, that's fine. Um, so I guess that's my thoughts on it. That's my that's my thoughts on it as of now. I thought about it for a long time, but I guess that's how I feel at the moment. Um, so I want to circle back to clock. Um, so what's so I guess what's going to happen with the clock community, right? Because there's a number of dedicated solvers, and what's interesting is a lot of these dedicated clock solvers, they might not like the clock might be their best event by far. Like for some reason, I don't know what it is. I guess because it's so different, it has a different maybe it has a different skill set. Like you're not turning the same way. I'm not really sure, but you know, I wonder how, obviously I see how clock solvers are reacting, even if I see how people that aren't really clock solvers are reacting, and they don't like it either. Like the whole removal clock thing. Um, and I guess in the direction WCA is going, I am a little worried that we're just axing stuff and we're potentially diluting cubing, like for the purpose of just making it look pretty. I don't like that idea very much, but you know, there it is what it is, So first I want to say first of all that like to the clock community, I want to say first of all, like I see a lot of people saying like, well, we just wasted our time practicing because now it's not an event. Um, I don't agree with the notion that something has to be a WC event forever to be worth practicing. I don't agree with the notion that people wasted their time practicing because at the end of the day, that is what you wanted to do. Maybe you were motivated by competitions having clock, but you wanted to do it. You enjoyed it, so you practiced it, and you still have the event for a year. Um, I can see some people in the clock community like straight up quitting. There are those people like this could make them not want to interact with the WCA anymore or Cube anymore. Some people react that way, but some people will react differently. They will maybe they already do a lot of other puzzles. They enjoy cubing in general, so they're going to keep cubing, and they're going to put that energy that they put into clock, all the time they put into clock, suddenly gets put somewhere else. And I've seen this happen multiple times. When an event gets removed and someone's really good at it, some people become insanely good at something else. Some of these people that are really good at solving clock, they're gonna get really good at something else. It's gonna happen. There's gonna be at least one person that does that. Like, I've seen it happen with feet. I've seen someone who was really good at magic start practicing something else and they're really good at that. Like it happens. Um, so I think you can take this a number of different ways. I understand if you were really into clock solving and this happened that you're upset, but what I'm trying to say is you could take this a lot of different ways. You could divert that energy somewhere else and maybe become really good at something else. I want to shout out Tommy Cherry because he, excuse me, was one of the many people that made a video about this, and he's the only person I saw that I guess called for introspection. Uh, he, I guess, he asked people to, look within. I don't know his exact words, but he asked people to look within themselves and like try and see like what this means for them and how they're going to take this. And I agree with that. You know, um, so it's up to you whether you want to keep solving clock, but there will still be a clock community. There's people are still going to solve clock, and you know what? Some competitions, even after Uppsala, are going to hold clock. It's just not going to be official. But if you still think that clock should have never been removed and it should still be held at competitions, I don't care if they're not going to have it at Worlds, or I don't care if it's not WCA sanctioned. Say, yeah, I like solving clock and I'm going to keep doing it. Well, I'm sure a lot of delegates and organizers might agree with you. And let me tell you something. FTO, we have been competing in it for years at competitions. It has been WCA sanctioned. We've been going through cubing contests. And to me, if you really think that we need to keep holding clock competitions, you can sign a petition, you can share your thoughts like I'm doing and like everyone else already has. But if you ask me, you cannot count on you cannot depend on the WCA to give you the service of clock competitions anymore. You have to, the community has to do it themselves, and that's what FTO has been doing. There are some organizers and delegates that are like, yeah, like a lot of them think, yeah, clock should have never been removed. We should still keep holding it, and then that gives you something to practice for. Look, you weren't. I don't think you were making a lot of money off this in the first place, so if you really like it, you should keep doing it. Um, there's a lot of unofficial events that people keep doing, and they like it, and that's up to you. So you could keep solving clock, or you could start doing something else. Um, it's up to you how you're going to take this. I guess that's all I have to say. Um, so hopefully some of what I said resonated with some people, and comment if you have a comment. If you like the video and you want to hear me talk more about whatever, I have thoughts about a lot of things. I just don't normally share them in this sort of setting. Let me know. So yeah, have a good one, everyone.